Mhm. Kia ora. Yeah. Yep. It's, you could bring a chair in there if you want to, or I don't mind if you're not too fussy, sit on the floor. We're good. To start with a quick karakia. Um, Mauri oho, Mauri tū, kia tātou, haumie, huie, tai kie. Kia ora. Thanks for joining in at the beginning. There's quite a few of you here, so hopefully I can do a bit of justice to this learning. And I do hope after a bit of intro that we have discussions among you, and at the end a bit of next steps as a collective, because my study journey is, I basically undertook it first for my own development, and then thinking about my whānau, but then thinking about us as a community. So my first steps are kind of our first steps wherever we might be, and we're all at different points. So you might be someone who has a lot of knowledge to share, or you might be starting off, but if we can all do this together, and towards the end if we can figure out some specific next steps that we might do. So for me, I realised that some of my shortcomings, or things I didn't really know, were keeping me from being a better teacher, and meant that if I didn't know things, my students surely weren't learning them in my class. So I am Pakeha, but I'm from a tūhoi family. So also part of this understanding of kaupapa Māori approaches to health and te ao Māori broadly is about our family's journey too, to come back to some understanding that was lost, as we all know. We've all got probably stories that we can relate to. So part of my motivation is my own development to do better and be better, and I'm hoping that will inspire my family and, as I said, our community at large. So in terms of where I'm coming from, a health teacher in mainstream education, and with that acknowledgement, there's a lot that kura kaupapa are doing that we can learn from already. Spaces that are probably pretty untapped, I think, from a mainstream side. So there's a lot of people doing wicked learning there. And there might be some people here today who can share too. My key kind of driver was, and it was quite hard to find the words, but a kaupapa Māori approach to health promotion originally, to enhance my own knowledge and skills. So knowledge, understanding, and also what I might do and how I might be. And I ended up enrolling in a course with Te Wānanga Aotearoa, which is He Tikanga Whakaaro, which is a home-based course. Amazing resources, some really, really good learning. Comes after He Papa Tikanga, some of you might have done that. Again, amazing resources, and something which I think most people in New Zealand could probably do and learn from. But I teamed this learning with a project where I'm interviewing people one-on-one, and my driver is to hear their stories. And that's been an interest I've had for a long, long time, the power of story. And I can see the Hemi at the back there. We used to work together, an English teacher, and there was lots of times we just had conversations about the power of story and some of the learnings we've had through health and PE and how you might teach and how you might learn. But just the power of story is one of the takeaways that I'm forever learning about. And hopefully we'll continue these stories and thinking about who you might talk to. And that idea of reaching out to people and asking for them to tell their stories is something that's pretty achievable and quite I find a lovely way to learn, ways that you can really connect with. And from the people I've interviewed already, I feel like when I go back into the classroom, I'm going to be able to talk about what they've told me in a more natural, kind of meaningful way. So I think that power of story is something we can all do and we can all learn from. So this is where I'd like you to just pair up, or in a three, it's all good. The first question is thinking about who feeds your personal aspirations and why. And it might be your aspirations for change or growth. It could be a family member you relate to, or it could be a role model. So if you could just maybe pair up, or if like I said, in threes, decide who's going to go first. And I'm going to put the timer on so we can we'll all have a chance to have a kororo and to listen and to speak. Okay, so decide who's going to be number one to speak. And you're just going to have, I think I set 2 minutes, is that right? Yep, 2 minutes to speak on answering the first question. Okay. Can you guys see the... Yeah. Feel free to come in if you want to. All right. Oh, there we go. 2 minutes. Okay, first person. You guys all good? You're good? And make sure you talk about the why too, get the depth about why they inspire you, or nice stories. Thanks for your talk this morning. I'd like to chat with you sometime, it's pretty cool. I'd have to chat with you, it'd be cool. It's interesting, yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I'm such a baby in learning about it, but I love it, yeah.
To be honest, it's crazy how high I got to it. Yeah, and everything that
Okay, and if you haven't, swap over and make sure you do the why. Tell us why as well. Just make sure you do the why as well, like go deeper and make sure everyone has a chance to talk. Yeah, who did you guys talk about?
Aspirations.
Yeah, like who kind of feeds it?
Both on the same page. We don't really have aspirations. We like self-driven.
Yeah, okay. Are there any people who you like do it for, or the reason why? No.
I know that like cultures have like family influences as well. Like
Yeah.
I've never had any push from family or like any expectations around it. So in terms of like aspirations, it's probably been like a few family role models or like teachers, lecturers that I've
Yeah.
that's maybe driven me slightly, but not really.
Okay. That's justified, eh? Like those people who come in your life, who you like want to be like them, or they drive you to be something you hadn't thought of, maybe? Is that what? Yeah, were you the sort of the same role models, or?
Yeah, we're self-driven. I mean, your family's always going to be
Yeah.
the biggest driver, but at the same time, I've got no one that has done the same pathways or
Okay. Yeah, it's like specifically in teaching, or yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, sometimes it's about character too, I reckon. You know, like how you want to be. Yeah, cool. Thanks. Okay. Okay. It's up here under the sun. Again. Yeah. Sweet. Yeah.
Because that's still Māori, but
Doing the snippets.
A big part of it is how you feel like yourself from doing it. So first of all, if you climb a rock face, as good a place as we can be. They say leave the world in a better state.
Still talking? That's good. I just lurk around and hear these little snippets, eh? I'm like, little bits of gold. Cool. Okay, we'll just stop there. Cool. There's lots of, I get to just lurk around and be that creepy teacher who's like, oh yeah, interesting. So thanks everyone for sharing. So hopefully this made you think a little bit about yourself and your connection to some other people, whoever they might be. For question 2, I was wondering if anyone was happy to share what you spoke about, just to get a bit of a feel of either what you might be doing or what you think you could be doing. So if anyone wants to share, that'd be cool.
We were talking about, I doing this analysis at a 3 level, but also looking and how Māori engage in the environment.
Mhm.
One of my students approached it to me last semester about how he would do a karakia before he even engaged or went for one of his hunts.
Mhm.
So why do you do that? And he was like, there's lots of reasons why, and we went really deep into it. And he talked about how he would like engage in the environment as well. And I was like, right, we need to actually bring this into our learning space and understand it more. But also the skill sets. So navigation of the stars and the sun, actually bringing someone that's knowledgeable in that area. And then we talked about when we do that, then it's you kind of take that barrier away of being scared with confidence. Like when I go into my space, sometimes I'm scared to pronounce or use Te Reo Māori because I'm scared I'm going to mispronounce and disrespect. So then I kind of shy away from it, which is worse because I need to practice what I preach with my students. So we're talking about that and that kind of like how we navigate that space and actually being open with our students and being like, hey, this is what I'm trying, where you can, and if I'm doing it incorrectly, can you help me out? Because this is the area that I want to really excel in. And then there's those relationships.
Awesome. Is that embracing uncertainty, eh? Like, and how do we, for a lot of people, I would imagine there's that uncertainty in this space. And I went into the study before, we've heard about the changes that are coming anyway. Like, so I can understand that in our community there's a lot of people going, oh, what do I, and uncertainty and fear, and other people with thinking, how do I share? And also that concern of people who do have knowledge and want to share, whether it's a student or people in the community, to not burden and be like, we want to take, and, put a lot of pressure on people. What are some other ways that people have acknowledged that they do value Māori knowledge or could do? Oh, just the second question here. Yeah. Cool. Paper up.
As I sort of spoke about this morning in terms of stories, but also I think we can forget that our rangatahi come into kura and they have a lot of stories to tell around their life and their experiences. So bringing those into the classroom and giving value to them, and then definitely we're building relationships up with the local marae, not just going to when you need something, but actually building those relationships first. And then having that kind of connection and then developing that so that our young people can go there whenever they want and vice versa, and just really strengthens the whole kura.
Yeah, and fits so nicely, naturally into our curriculum area, hey? Like our students and themselves in the world and how the world is, and how they navigate that when they leave school and during school. Yeah, kia ora.
I was just going to say just everything is a whakapapa, and then the connections that are formed or are there. So just through our learning, whether it be in our classroom and te tai ao, there's always a link somewhere.
Cool, and we already do, outdoor education and get outside, and so we're already in those contexts where that's meaningful and relevant for us. Yeah, kia ora. And I can only relate to, I just remember at high school, the school I went to, my kura was the te reo teacher, but he never taught us, or my stepmum and so on. And so I remember the teachers kind of knew it. I was connected to his family, part of his family, and just them saying, trying to be really inclusive and be like, so Natasha, you're da-da-da-da this, so can you tell me for all Māori what this means, and can you give da-da-da? And I've only had that probably a couple times in my life, but man, I felt so embarrassed and like such a load, and I'm quite mindful about how I move into this space too. And the next part, and I want us to kind of all think about and to have an ongoing conversation, is how we might be in this space. For me, I like to be curious and to be humble. Like the people that I've interviewed one-on-one, I'm trying to be really conscious and self-aware of where I'm at in terms of my knowledge and how I am, my ways of being, and just really, really keen to learn. And through the stories that have been just asking them some simple questions, which I'll show you, the dialogue that comes from really simple questions and the whakapapa of however they think about this. The questions are around health, essentially, to start with. But, it leads into a course, well, this comes from my understanding from when I was a kid, and, people just start talking naturally about how they came to have certain understandings and ideas about the way they see the world and the way they see themselves. So I think it's quite a nice, natural way just to korero, have these talks with people for us to learn and me just to listen, which is cool because I don't really love public speaking, so just listening is a great place to be. And the things that people will share, when you're just asking them questions, it's quite magical. So I've kind of gone into it thinking there's multiple ways of understanding the world, and I'm open to that, so I want to hear people's perspectives on it. I've tried to engage during my study leave in Te Ao Māori, and that's one thing I've consciously done is just change my diet of consumption, my media consumption. So the voices I might hear, the pages I might follow, and again, more and more I'm just so aware of all these amazing people doing amazing things that previously I was unaware of. That's just saying, pick my kid up from kindy. She's not there today, it's okay. But so just that's something consciously people can do is just to change their media consumption, their diet, where their ideas are coming from and what ideas they're taking in. And effectively again it comes back to that our curriculum area. So if I have a better understanding of Te Ao Māori and lots of people and contexts that I can share with students, then they have a chance to engage in Te Ao Māori, and that's good for everybody. So moving forward, it's about seeing these positive representations and seeing all these different multiple ways of understanding the world that kids might connect with. Go, oh yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that way, or that really relates to me and my family, or maybe, oh, this person looks amazing, I want to go find out some more from them. So by me having a broader view of the world and how you might see things, then students have a chance to connect and see things in a broader way, to understand themselves, other people, and, like I said, the world that they exist in. And there's a bit of acknowledgement of critiquing the power within the world that they live in and the structures that they're in. These were the questions. I thought of all different things to ask, and then essentially I came back to first, what does health, hauora, and I've said whatever words, there's so many words that and concepts that have lots of different meanings, but when I talk to people they can choose which one or a few they might want to talk about. And how do you go about achieving health or hauora outcomes? Again, that word achieving is a really interesting one, but I couldn't think of anything better to say. And that's part of the learning too, just to contrast that you might not achieve health, you might not be striving for it, but it might be a different way of being. My intention from the answers to these questions is to find out different perspectives, and potentially to, from the videos, is to have little parcels that could be resources for teachers or for students, so little 2-minute clips where people can learn and hear about different ways. Just a couple of drivers and good places to start to, or places to go back to. Last year in the first big lockdown, or the nationwide lockdown, Toi Tangata, an organisation who are quite close to my school, put out Toi Ako webinars. Has anyone heard of those? Yep, cool. And for me that was where I first was like, these amazing people doing amazing things that I had no idea about. Shame on me. And not necessarily sit in shame, but like I said, if I didn't know about it, my kids certainly weren't learning about it. So that was one of my drivers. I had to ask, I think on one of the Facebook pages, when was the last time we were here for PENS? And it was 2014. And I think Hirangi Heki was one of the keynotes. And his work is really, really interesting, I find. Atua Mātua, learning about systems thinking and dynamics, and he also was the recipient of an award a couple years ago, so he's pretty key in our community. I spoke to him after he ran a session with some people, and it was pretty cool that he was able to took the time to talk, and that again was where it kind of sparked for me, and now I look back, that was like 7 years ago, to just learn more and to dig into these ways of understanding. So he's a pretty interesting one to follow. These two webinars are really good places to start. Te Mirirangi, these two I've interviewed since for my one-on-one interviews. And a little bit about Te Miri's work for his PhD. There's a lot, so I've written it down. He looked, as it said, about traditional practices, beliefs and values, and he came up with, well, he looked at a whole lot of things, but beliefs and values, trying to really find out what it was like back in the day. And some of the things he talked about, just the things you might be interested in finding out about, was he Māori te ahua, and that idea of a holistic system of well-being that is embedded in society. And it's almost that idea that health is, what is health? It's almost everything. And the idea that that society was supporting this way of being, this idea of flourishing, how to survive and thrive. Another thing he talked about was he Māori te tau, and so again that connection, that deep intrinsic relationship on all levels, physical, mental, spiritual connection to our environment, and from that atua. And he talks about, interestingly, I think of it like an outdoor context, about understanding the environment before you take action in it. And an example he shares is about understanding the characteristics of tangaroa before you engage in that environment. And like obviously to be safe, to have a positive experience in that, to be successful. So that was pretty interesting. Identity too, he talks about connecting to nature to facilitate our understanding of ourselves. And he talks about physical activity might be how we understand our relationship to atua. Yeah. So that's quite an interesting one from for our perspective around how important movement is, and perhaps related to hauora. And Dr. Tia Carlson, you're going to hear a bit about, just quickly, her PhD research was about pūrākau and story, about lived experience, about testing and trying ideas, and about putting things into practice, so whakahara tau. And she's got some really good, beautiful imagery. She is a beautiful artist, and she communicates her ideas a lot of the time through her creativity, through her visual arts. Coming up, some people who I've been talking to who I might interview. Deb Heke has done a Toiako webinar recently, and she's been looking at atua in connection to manawahine, so physical female contemporary times who have a physical activity identity, and then how the characteristics of atua are connected there. Wiremu Gray, you might have seen recently, has a different framework for understanding a health model, similar to Te Whare Tapawhā, but with others integrated. Tane Mete is a dancer, choreographer, and yoga teacher. Renee, on the bottom right-hand corner, I've been working closely with at Toi Tangata. Originally, I approached them to see if I could work in a health promotion project to be a part of that and volunteer. Similar to, and this is something I didn't know existed, so it's quite good for your students, they have an internship. I think it's called Te Puna, the internship. So tertiary students who are doing health studies, they can study with them over the summer and learn about integrating the tauranga Māori into their studies. It's amazing. Again, they're up the road from us, but I didn't know it existed. So check that out if it's something your students might like to do, and to tell maybe your 13s about it. And Himi, she's in the back there from Motatuna, who I used to work with always has good ideas and a good way about expressing things. And Kayla Goodine is an ex-student of mine who is talented in a number of ways, and she's just starting to get into her own business space about health and wellness and health coaching, I guess. Cool. A little bit from Dr. Tia Carlson.
That's that kind of health lens, I feel like, is a huge focus. But when I think about ho ora, it's much about the breath, ho, and ora, the foundation or essence of life that can encompass health, but all these other beautiful things around it. And I think the biggest oversight when you think about how people understand ho ora is in this contemporary time, how to unpack and understand, components of understanding te taha hinengaro, the mental health side of things, te taha whānau, relational health, te taha tinana, your kind of bodily health. But a big part of it, and all interwoven through all of that, is te taha wairua, which is encompassed and held on te taha whenua, so that's the land. And without all of those components and the interweaving of wairua, then health is, or whole is only one small part of that. It has to be held and understood within wairua, and that's a big part of my work, is articulating what that means in contemporary ho ora context, and make
Cool. Cool. This is another key learning she had from her study with Ngāti Porou, where she was asked to come up with a health literacy or approach to health literacy, and some of the key things she found out was to teach health practitioners like doctors and so on is to listen and to have a dialogue. So we all probably know if you get bad news or someone gets bad news from the doctor, it's quite hard to take in, and wouldn't it be great if there was someone who could actually go, oh, sorry, can you just repeat that again? Or for the doctor to say, what do you understand? And, you know, how can we put this into the context of what you're doing at the moment? Just a bit of dialogue rather than just do this, and they go, and don't know what to do. Yeah, so anyway, she was talking about whakarongo, and I'll let her talk a bit more about it. Whakarongo.
Yeah, so the whakarongo kōrero comes from Erowera Sterling, which is a karakia or a incantation, if you like, from him. He was a tohunga on the East Coast, and part of my journey in understanding Te Reo Māori, I believe, begins with Te Reo Māori, and then also begins nicely with anything I can get my hands on that is almost like pre-colonisation, or the kind of a kōrero that is heavily influenced and embedded in mātauranga Māori. And this particular chant, incantation, has lots to it and lots of depth, and I'm pretty much at the point of understanding that first line, which repeats whakarongo, and I guess in a literal translation, it could be around the actions of listening. And then, but why would he repeat it 3 times? And that, you know, and then understanding that the atua to, for instance, there's only a few atua that were made that gifted our eyes. And I don't want to give it a number because I don't want it to be wrong. I can't remember exactly, but it was only a few. And then when we think about the atua that gifted our ears, there's about 70 plus atua that gifted our ears. And then when I mean ears, I mean the formation of listening. And listening is I believe, a whole embodied sense. And ears are that one representation or two representations on our body, but of that embodied thinking. So whakarongo is that acknowledgement of the realm of, I guess, your tarangi, which could almost be interpreted as your hinengaro, your mental understanding, that aspect of you. And then you've got your heart, so your manawa, so that's kind of the emotional pulling of how we listen and how we understand and how we enact our listening. And then your puku, which is heavily drawn on and more so related to like your brain. Like your brain is down here, this is your gut health, that's all part of it. And it's your intuition, it's your knowing, your deep sense of knowing, more so from your lifetimes ago that come, okay, this is telling me I've been here before, or I know what's to come. And so whakarongo is that acknowledgement. And it's not to say that that's the only parts either. It's that opening or pathway to understand that there are different dimensions, to really just being in this moment and understanding. And that's a practice that I will take for me for lifetimes, to be a great listener, to really listen. And there's not many people that I feel are really deep listeners and aren't just waiting to then speak. Waiting for you to have a pause and then jump in there and go blah, blah, blah. You know, so I feel like that's something that I can contribute in every aspect, because I feel like the pathway to healing and the pathway to come back to ourselves is to be truly listened to be witnessed as you are. And how does that happen? Through whakarongo. Just by someone listening, not judging. I'm just going to...
So I thought this is a cool thing you could teach with students around how you might be in the health space. So students who are moving into perhaps becoming a nurse or something like that. But also for myself, thinking about my relationships with students and with people at school. And that idea of when we're learning about tauranga Māori, is it's not just about learning stuff. It's about understanding and like a deep feeling of that. And with that, I think that's a good step forward from probably that fear, that thing we need to avoid around, the tokenism that has been there. And again, with not fear to not start, but there's places to go, there's depth. And for example, a pūrākau, we might start and it's something we can share, but to really, I think you mentioned that earlier, Louise, about the upskilling that's required to unpack a pūrākau to get the depth of it. You can start here, but there's so much learning that you can do, and so many connections and complexity that can be gained as you continue to learn. The second question I asked was a bit more political and helping teachers to think what to think about when planning and teaching. So I asked them about the best way to learn about hauora in mainstream schools, and one of my thinking was about that tension between lived experience, learning hauora that way, or learning about hauora. So implicit, explicit learning a little bit was the tension there.
Hauora. And then talk about the things that you do and personalise it, and as much as you feel comfortable. And these are the examples of my life, like me talking about my dad and then me talking about my mum. Those are the kōrero that I feel like I can draw on that give meaning and reality to what it looks like right now, and then I'll draw in maybe a pūrākau, a foundation story from our ancestors that then complements that, and talk to maybe the kōrero between papatuanuku and hinemoana. So that's a mother and a daughter. And a mother and daughter relationship there is that papatuanuku is our Mother Earth, and she's our foundation, she's our everything. And hinemoana being the daughter, the goddess, if you like, of the sea. She is the constant friction against papatuanuku, constantly shaping her ocean floors, her shorelines, and that friction and that growth and that change is a constant need in our environment. And so for me and my mum's relationship, and me pointing out as an adult to my mum, you know, that stuff wasn't quite helpful as a kid when you put yourself down. You might want to work on that, or something like that. That's the enactment of the pūrākau, papatuanuku as my mum, and me as hinemoana coming in, and I'm doing that, and I'm constantly shaping and challenging my mum, and that's just my role. And that's a nice reinforcement that that friction and that daru, growth happens on both sides, and it's okay. So you might have rangatahi in your class where they might have fallen out with their parents, or they might have fallen out with their friends, and you're like, well, that's actually a great part of hauora because it's said in our pūrākau.
So I really like just there, I was thinking about how can I take some of this to my teaching, and I think about health issues we're talking about, or things that kids might be struggling with, and then you have a pūrākau that might really underpin and nourish and help to provide a framework or way of understanding their current situation. So I thought that was a really good way to put it, to come in. The last three stories about tāne, matariki, rehua might be really relevant in terms of their connection to well-being or to healing, just as in ways in, if you're starting out to incorporate this into your teaching. There's an amazing kōrero that we won't have time for, but where it's a health model that Te developed from her work with Ngāti Porou, and I'll add this to the Facebook page where I'm going to put up some of the stories. But essentially I thought implications for practice might be embedding the values of Mātauranga Māori into Māoritanga into your ways of being in your class. So, you know, how do you, what do you think about manaakitanga, and how do you incorporate that in the way you are with your students? Accepting there's multiple ways of seeing health and how it's achieved. Being open in your classroom to integrating different perspectives and voices. Embrace the power of storytelling, so it might be that student in your class who's willing to share, or someone that they know. Who do you, so on your piece of paper, if you've got a pink piece of paper, who could you approach for your own learning to ask questions? Might be someone in your family or someone you know or you admire. Who could you approach to kōrero to find out their story, to learn from for your own development? Or it could be someone who you invite in to your school for your students. But being really, really mindful about what works for people. And I've found that if it's their own story, then maybe they don't have to, you know, create a presentation, and it's not perhaps a big load on them. It could be sharing their story, but freely if they want to come in and share or talk with you, then the people I've approached have all been like, if I've got time, like that sounds cool, I'd be happy to share my own story. So it could be a really good way to start our development and our learning in this area. So who could you connect with? What questions could you ask? I had some really simple ones. What is health? How is it achieved? And how might you, in your experience or your thoughts, Tia answered as a mother, how she would teach her children. That's how she could recommend how we teach in our classrooms. And how might you be on this journey? For me, I go into it being curious and being humble. there might be some other things we need to consider or that work for you to guide on your journey. Cool. This is where the stories will be posted on the Facebook page Health and PE New Zealand. So if you want to have a look, that whakawhanaungatanga model will be up there. And just as I do more interviews, I can share, because I want it to be for our community as a place to start, or just to start thinking and sharing. There might be people that you know that I should interview or we should reach out to, so that we can start building that knowledge together. Cool. And I'll just have to cut off there. If you could just join me in closing. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ao, te aroha, me te marutau, tihei, mauri ora. Cool. Thank you all for being here.
Sorry, please say, thank you so much, Natasha, for allowing your time and wisdom and knowledge to us and our students moving on this journey of teaching, and we really appreciate you coming here today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.